The intent of this video is to be a supplemental lecture for my online public speaking class. All rights are owned and reserved by The Art of Public Speaking, 13th edition, and McGraw-Hill Publishing. There's no intent for me to profit from this lecture. I wanted to provide my online students with some voiceover lecture background for each of these chapters before they take their test. So this is my intent. So I'm going to try and keep these videos as short as possible, but I do want to help you understand some concepts that are in the textbook. One of the things we want to talk about with this class is why is it important to understand public speaking? And three reasons for that is it's a way of making our ideas public and available to the people around us. We want to be able to inform the people around us, and we want to be able to persuade them to look at the world maybe in a different way than they do. The second thing to understand is it can be very important for your career. It is one of the top things that employers are looking for, and that is oral communication skills. And finally, if you want to be engaged in your community or politically or things like that, being able to be an effective speaker is a great way to get your point across and make people understand you and help them decide big important issues that are in the world. We also want to think about public speaking in terms of some of the similarities and differences from just a regular conversation. So some of the things that are similar include this idea that before we go into a conversation, we typically organize our thoughts about what we're going to say and who we're going to talk to. We also tailor our message to the audience. If we're talking to our children, or if we're talking to our parents, or if we're talking to our friends, we think about the audience and how we're going to make them understand us. The next thing is that human beings really love storytelling. There's even someone refers to human beings as instead of Homo sapiens, Homo narrus, meaning storytellers. So that is something that has a big impact on us when we're learning and trying to find out new things, as we want to hear stories. And finally, in a conversation, even when it's one-on-one with somebody, we are adapting to the feedback we're getting from them. If they're giving us good feedback, we are happy and enjoy it and keep talking and help them understand more. But if people aren't paying attention to us, we have to find a way to help them understand us and pay attention. So we adapt to feedback. Some of the differences between conversation and public speaking is inevitably public speaking is going to be more structured. We actually work through outlines and frameworks and things like that. And the reason is because we have to think about effectiveness and timing. So structure helps us kind of deal with those two issues. Often public speaking requires more formal language. In a lot of ways, we want to keep our speeches conversational, but we also have to make sure that we understand definition of things, and we are able to define and use metaphors and statistics and numbers to help us make our audience understand us. And then also, finally, it's a different mode of delivery. It's actually kind of an awkward mode of delivery. We're not sitting facing someone one-to-one. We're actually out in front of a bunch of people all by ourselves, which makes it kind of scary sometimes. So that's a different method of delivery, and it kind of, in some ways, takes that feedback away from us and causes us some problems making sure the audience is understanding us. Stage fright is very common for everybody. Anxiety over the prospect of speaking is something that everybody experiences, whether you're the most qualified public speaker in the world or if you're brand new at it. You're gonna experience some kind of stage fright. The thing to remember is that it can be gotten over and can be worked through, and that's going to be the way that you're going to be able to get up and stand in front of people, is if you take stock of what you're doing and think about some things that you can do to make yourself less anxious. The first thing you can do to make yourself less anxious about speaking in front of the public is get experience. Do it in a lot of different ways. Try different ways of speaking to people and doing public presentations. The next thing is I see this in students all the time. The more that you prepare, the more that you've put your thoughts together logically, written them down, and practiced them, the much better your speech is going to be. So you can't just put this all together in the night before and be able to do it well. You should think positively. Don't assume that you're going to do a bad job just because you're nervous. There's actually a lot of things about that anxiety can help sometimes, because it gives you a level of energy that can help you out. Use visualization. See yourself doing it well, which is why it may not be a bad idea to watch yourself do it in front of a mirror one time and see what it looks like. And again, the more you practice, the more you see yourself doing it well, the better you're going to be. Also, something to remember is those things that you're feeling are not visible to most people. So the fact that your stomach is rumbling, or the fact that your mouth is dry, the fact that you're kind of in a tunnel vision, the audience can't see that, and they are going to be able to forgive you for the things that they can see, and they'll probably be kind of rooting for you if you are nervous. Also, don't expect yourself to do perfectly. And this is the thing, you're never going to do a completely perfect presentation, but that's okay. And one of the things that can be most helpful is if you do make a mistake, don't dwell on it. Just keep moving and keep going. And the mistakes sometimes are so small, we notice them as the speaker, but the audience doesn't really notice them. Controlled nervousness is, again, I said that can be a very positive thing if we can harness it and turn it into energy to give to the audience. Visualization, again, is picturing yourself doing it successfully, and that's the same way with whether you're doing a speech or you're practicing free throws for basketball. If you visualize yourself doing it successfully, it's going to help you attain that. Now, that's not to say you can just visualize yourself doing it and it'll be successful. It just means that it helps you in that process. It helps you see yourself doing it and having a positive, successful outcome. Something that's very important for this class and also for public speaking is the ability to use your critical thinking skills to be able to focus and organize your thinking, understand the relationships between the ideas, understand the soundness of the evidence that you're giving to your audience, and knowing the difference between what is a fact and what's an opinion, and knowing that it's important, especially in a persuasive speech, even though you're using your opinion maybe to change someone's mind, you're also going to have facts to back that up so that people will be engaged enough in the argument so that they can maybe change their mind. Okay, just quickly, these are some of the terminology you'll probably want to know for the test. What a speaker is, what the message is, the channel, listener. But let's look at this next slide so I can kind of explain that. What you'll notice here is that communication is not just a one-way thing. And even public speaking is not a one-way thing. You are providing a message to your audience choosing a specific channel. So that channel could be your voice, it could be a PowerPoint or a visual aid, and your audience is giving you feedback. If you do something funny in the speech, they laugh. That's good feedback, makes you feel good. But if you're going on and people are starting to get bored, some of the feedback you may see is people yawning or turning their focus to something else. So that's a good time to assess, well, maybe I need to cut part of this out or do something different or try something different. And the only way you're going to be able to do that, have that adaptability, is if you've practiced and been able to really get to know the content of your speech. And then finally, lots of different things get in the way of people being able to understand or listen. And that's what we call noise or interference. And finally, the last thing you kind of want to look at is what's called the situation, or another way you can look at it is what is the context of what's going on. So how is the environment affecting how your message is being received by your audience? So something else you have to consider. When you're talking to an audience, you have to understand that audience in order to be able to reach them. And we talk about something that's called a person's frame of reference, or another term you might hear sometimes used that's very similar is called someone's worldview. So how do they experience the world? What do they know? What are their goals? What are their values and attitudes? We need to know those kind of things so that we can reach an audience. Everything that people receive comes through their frame of reference or their worldview. And the thing we need to understand as a good public speaker is that no two people have the same frame of reference. Something to be avoidant, or something to avoid, is what we call ethnocentrism, which is different from stereotyping. Stereotyping is kind of putting people into categories that are stuck. Ethnocentrism is believing that your way of thinking, your group or culture, is superior to others because, and basically the reason ethnocentrism exists is because we tend to be selfish, and we tend to be a little bit self-righteous. We tend to think that the way we do things is obviously superior to the way other groups do it. And why? Well, not a very good answer, but the answer typically is because it's the way we do it and we've always done it. But that's not necessarily a good understanding of why something is good or not. Some ways that you can avoid ethnocentrism, or this idea that your way of looking at the world is better, is respect your listeners' cultural values. So that may mean doing some analysis sometimes. Understand where they're coming from. Adapt your messages to the expectations of your audience. What do they want to hear from you? What do they want to know? Also, being able to put yourself, I know that's the old tired cliche of walking a mile in somebody else's shoe, but it is important. Can you put yourself in the place of your listeners, especially if you're trying to persuade them? Because if you don't understand where they're coming from, you're not going to be able to pick out the evidence that's going to be able to change their mind. Be alert to feedback. Be aware that the things that you're saying are affecting people, and they're going to display that effect in the way the feedback that they give you. So be watching your audience as best you can to see how they're reacting to the information. And finally, as a listener, you also have to avoid ethnocentrism. If someone's giving you a speech or telling you about a different way of doing something, or their understanding of how something works, or why you should look at this from a different point of view, we have to not automatically assume our way of doing it is better, and be able to listen to them in a way that allows us to let some of that in. That you can avoid ethnocentrism and still not have to change your mind every time you hear something or someone who has a differing opinion than you do. It's just about avoiding ethnocentrism is about being more open to other people's way of looking at the world. And there are a lot of different ways to look at the world. And that is the lecture for Chapter 1 in kind of brief, to give you an idea. And I'll be producing these for the rest of the chapters in the book. So if you have any questions, please email me and I'll be glad to help you out. Thank you.